Welcome to the Whole Enchilada, a community of high achievers that fight the status quo, rebel against mediocrity, and make life happen. Let's go.
Hey, Enchilada Nation, really excited about our conversation today. I've got not only a brilliant businessman, but a friend of mine, David Barroso, on the call with me. One of the things I've really loved about David is he's in the grind and the hustle on a day-to-day basis in the same role that I am, which I love learning from other business owners that are doing other things because it makes me feel differently, or think differently. But I love also talking to people that are in the same trench that I am, because there's some empathy with that as well. And it's like you're dealing with not only conceptually with a similar issue or obstacle that I am, you're actually dealing with the same issue and obstacle that I am. So I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. David is currently the regional director for the Greater Heartland area for Keller Williams. And David, what else should our listeners and network know about you before we get rolling into our conversation today?
I'm also an OP of two market center within the Greater Heartland. So combined, our organization right now has just about 900 agents. And I love what I do and love helping people and try to be the best teammate I can on a daily basis.
Yeah, awesome. I love that you bring up teammate, because before we jump into this, you've got a history, an athletic history too. So I'm sure you got a lot of time as being a great teammate. Any comment you want to make around that?
Sure. I mean, I guess my previous career, my background, I had the privilege to get drafted in the NHL and by the New York Rangers and play minor in the minors for about 9 years. And I didn't realize my time in hockey would educate me as much as it has, or prepare me as much as it has for business. I'm actually pretty grateful I got to experience what I've experienced through sports and how much it correlated to my business journey.
Yeah. Well, I think my intention today is talk about leadership and navigating challenges with you. And actually, I think that's a great place to start our conversation, because I feel in my role as a coach and a leader that people are looking to me for direction. Is I do view it more as like we are teammates. We have different roles, just like on the ice, people have different positions. And I love that you brought up that you're a great teammate. Like, expand on that a little bit, that why you went to the word teammate more than I'm the leader of the organization. Because on an org chart, you are the leader, but I love that you view it as a teammate.
Yeah, I think Gary Keller is said like he would want. I've heard him say before, like he would want the word realtor on his tombstone. And if I were to pick one, it would be teammate. I think as an athlete, I got to experience the value of great teammates and what can happen when you have teammates that are pursuing a goal in alignment, and what outcome can come from that. And I also experienced what bad teammates can do, and how it can hinder a journey and affect everybody's journey, and kind of derail a lot of people's career to an extent, or at least for a period of time. And I don't think it's much different. I think there's a hierarchy in business, just like there is in sports. But at the end of the day, if you can't prioritize each other's success to focus on the whole, I'm not sure anybody can fulfill their potential. So I approach things I always approach things from a teammate perspective.
Yeah. I love that. My brain's like connecting the dots around this conversation, because I obviously any team that comes together, the intent is to win the game, right? The team that comes together in business is still, the intent is to win based on the goals put together. And I think there's two sides of that is how has the team decided they're going to play together, and how do they modify the execution of that playbook depending on the team they're playing, or in our scenario now in a business world, it's you've accumulated your players, your team, but the field has changed.
Yeah.
And so you have to modify. You might still have the right players. You have to modify and motivate the team differently based on the opponent you're facing and on what field you're facing, which I think is a little bit what we were talking about before this. So let's jump into that a little bit. Of like, how do you approach being a great teammate from the front in a world that's changing so fast right now?
Well, I'll take it a little further back, but I think before talking, plans or execution and things like that, I think of the word teammate as I try to incorporate the people where it has to become a lifestyle. Because if you just say it for the sake of saying it, and you're not, and living it means that you're more worried about being on the team than where you sit on the bench. And there's a lot of people that are a lot more worried about where they're sitting on the bench than what their role is on the team. So I think when you can surround yourself for people that are willing to develop the lifestyle of the teammate that we're looking for within our team, then you can start looking at planning and executions and so on and so forth becomes a lot easier. When you have teammates that are worried about where their place at the table is instead of being grateful to be at the table, I'm not sure you necessarily have the right people yet to go execute whatever plan you're putting together. So I think you have to start by creating an environment that empowers people to develop the teammate lifestyle, if you will.
Yeah.
And then the planning, the execution, all of this gets a whole lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. It was interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine that played in the NFL, and it was interesting that I can't remember the exact question that was asked, but it's something along the line of like, what is it you miss most about your days of that? And it wasn't. The answer was really interesting to me. I'm curious to see if this resonates with you. It wasn't a moment of a big victory or walking out and hearing the crowd. He's like, the thing I miss most is the locker room with my teammates, because that's where the relationships were built and the trust was built. Everything else was just the execution, the fun part, but it was the locker room, which is such an interesting answer to me.
Yeah, I would add to this, and I'd make the argument that you can describe somebody's locker room based on their performance. I think it's going to be reflected over time on the field, on the ice, or whatever it is that they're doing. I think it shows up at some point as to what that locker room is truly like. And if it's the way it's meant to be, then you have a lot of fun and you have great performances and people are winning and enjoying it. And if it has a certain phoniness to it or fakeness to it, then it also shows up. There's a lot of individuality that shows up in people's behavior, and people arrive late, they leave early, no one's hanging around, everybody's kind of on their own, and it shows for sure.
Yeah. What would be just playing with this analogy a little bit more, like what would be the business equivalent to the locker room, like where those relationships are made, the more intimate conversations, the strategies, because we look at a business and measure its success by the P&L and certain key metrics, but what would be the equivalent of the locker room?
I look at it, so I started my leadership journey in Keller Williams in 2010 with a market center that was not profitable. That was an opportunity that was given to me. And I started asking my OP at the time, I said, hey, when we travel somewhere, can we start taking people with us on the road? Can we take our broker? Can we take the MCA? And then eventually we had an agent services. Can we take the agent services? And she goes, we're not, the financial aspect of it was challenging. But I said, I'm telling you, I think if we start traveling together and we take people out of here for a night or two, and we get to go to dinner and we get to know each other and there'll be a different way people will fight for each other. I said, I firmly believe in that. So I said, let me try it for 3 months or so if we have events and things like that, and let's see where it takes us. And so early on, I've been a big believer in taking people on the road with me. And I think you like, if you think of mega camp, like in our world, like big events, like mega camp, I think you have the event itself, like game time, but I think your opportunity for growth and winning happens before and after, right? Like what happens away from the event? Like how do you debrief? How do you sit together and get to learn about each other? How do you help a teammate that goes through, right? I have kids, you have kids, and you're at mega camp and your phone's blowing up because somebody just fell off and hurt themselves somewhere or whatever. And then like how do you help a teammate going through that while you stay focused on task at hand on the road and all this stuff. So I think when you experience the road together, it creates a different level of relationship. And just like the locker room, right? The tighter the relationship becomes, the better, the more, I think it changes the performance for the team as a whole. So I that's kind of how I look at it from a business perspective.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I think through like my history of leadership, the people in my world that I've got the closest with, the highest level of trust, that were willing to shift and move with me almost without question. There was some element of a relationship built off the field. Like if the office would be the date where we meet on a day-to-day basis and we're executing our tasks, it was the going out to dinner with the spouses, or going to a fight night or something outside of the norm, where it's like now we're meeting as in relationship now and having deeper conversation. And I think a lot of people need that more now emotionally than ever.
For sure. And I think as a leader, I think as you develop this kind of culture, like this teammate culture, then I think you the way I look at it, anyway, my goal is to reach a point where then you feel privileged to be teammate to someone else,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And then when you feel that way, then you can't help it. It impacts your own performance because you're like, hey, this is I have to chip in, I have to carry my way, I have to help. And now you've met a spouse, you've met somebody's children, or so on and so forth. Then it changes, like making that call or or delivering on that appointment or delivering on this. There's a much bigger picture that gets created, that the impact of my performance goes beyond just my teammate now. And I think when you get to that point, you can't help but get different results.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it becomes a different game. I remember a very distinct moment in my career when all of a sudden, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it out loud, but it was a moment where all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I got it all wrong. Business is not about money. Business is about people. And once I made that connection that business was about people, even though I had experienced some element of success up to that point financially, like the money increased when I shifted the focus away from the money and made it about these are people that I want to build up. These are people I want to win with.
Well, going back to what I was saying earlier, right? I think when you see a business team that has this level of tightness and kind of collaborate at that level, it oftentimes they're at the top from a profit perspective.
Yeah,
they're taken care of financially somehow through their performance.
yeah,
And vice versa, right? Like like earlier when I was using the sports analogy, when people show up late, they leave early, nobody hangs around, nobody, they're not the one making the playoffs typically, right? Like they go to the last game of the year, their car is packed, the U-Haul is packed. They're like, all right, I'm gonna play tonight and I'm hitting the road. Like I'm done with these guys and all this stuff. I've seen that, like I've lived that, right? And to your point, like no one is taken care of financially at that point, right? So I think there's a direct correlation. I always tell people I'm not in the real estate business. I'm in the people business, and real estate's my product.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's shift gears slightly. I mean, it's within the same thread, but before we started our recording here, we were talking a little bit about a challenge and opportunity both of us are kind of feeling in our roles as leaders right now. is and all routed back to this word of confidence and certainty. And it's interesting for me to see some incredibly talented people in my world that have just crushed it and had so much momentum behind them over the last couple of years. All of a sudden, be the way they're showing up and their language is expressing some element of lack of confidence in their ability moving forward, and a little bit of uncertainty, like what does this mean for me and my family? And it's the talent level is still there. It's something's changed that's changed that confidence and certainty. Where's your mind around that right now?
I think I think I mean we had a hell of a run, right? Like I mean for a while, like it was just like it was quite the run. So I think we forgot a little bit about adversity, right? I think we forget how it feels, and I think we have to find a way to empower people to embrace adversity again. And to your point, like you still have the talent that you have that got you where you are. You still have the skills that got you where you are. I think we just have to kind of embrace adversity at a higher level, and I think it will take care of the uncertainty itself. I think people are resistant right now to have maybe tough conversation that they should have, because we didn't have to for a long time. Like
Yeah.
we were kind of unconsciously, I think we were coasting a little more than we thought we were, and now like it requires maybe a different approach to things. And I think embracing adversity and empowering people and reminding them that hey, you got this, is something that I've been doing quite a bit lately.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think that's such great advice. I love that you bring up we're avoiding these crucial or difficult conversations. And I'd love to get your take on this because I am a big believer. I'm very much of the belief system that two of the most important skill sets that we need to acquire is our ability to communicate at a higher level and our ability to problem solve. You communicate to bring the problems to the surface, right? To really identify what is the real problem, not the easy answer, but what is really the issue. And then
Right.
if you do that, do you have the skill set to say, now we understand it, can we solve the problem? And so I think a lot of times we think about this concept of critical or difficult conversations being with other people. And in my mind, right now, the number one difficult conversation or crucial conversation that people are avoiding is a conversation with themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also part of the challenge is a lot of times these conversation occurs where people are more focused on being right as opposed to do what is right. Right. And so to
That's
your point,
powerful.
like, what is right would be for me to look in the mirror first and say, hey, all right, Marcus, things are not obviously going the way you and I had agreed on. So here's where I'm at. Here's what I think. Here's where I'm dropping the ball. Here's where I think I can do better. You know, what do you think we can do different now? Where are you at? And so on. But I think people get so quick to defend their position or defend the result or defend why we are where we are. It really doesn't matter. Like this is where we are. So
Yeah.
all right, so what do we do next? You know?
Yeah.
So I think the willingness it goes back to this teammate thing, right? Like if I'm your teammate, as your teammate, I need to fight for what's right for both of us, not for me being right and kind of wagging my finger at you. And I think if you go in with that, then those hard conversations that people are referring to are really not that hard because now we're fighting for the same thing.
I think that's such a critical piece to it of pulling it back to we want the same thing.
All
And
right.
let's be open to communication, to exploring all options of how to get that thing. Because this is what's interesting to me is I do appreciate, I'm sure you're the same way. I'm getting a lot of calls, a lot of requests for me to meet with people to look at analyze their business. And I because they are talented people, and they have a business skill, they're coming prepared to the meeting. It's not just coming to say, things are broken, I don't know what to do. A lot of them are coming with solutions. One of the challenges I'm seeing in that is that they're coming to the table, and what they've identified the problem in their business that needs to be fixed are all external things.
Right.
And one of the hardest questions I have to ask them is, you need to listen, but then it's like saying, so what is your responsibility? Like, what is your ownership of the result not showing up? Like, I hear you say this person's not doing this, and I hear you saying the market's in this scenario, and I those things may be true and are probably true, but there's more to the story that where they're protecting themselves, right? It's not that they're hiding it, it's they're protecting themselves from that, opening up that vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to ask, like, what's the outcome you're looking for? Right. And is this moving you towards it or not? And then if it's not, then we need to realign wherever we're going or how we're going to get there. And we had a regional event last week, and Shannon Miller was a keynote speaker. She was a gymnast back in the 90s, and she won 7 Olympic medals. And she was telling a story on the last night of her last Olympics in 96, where she had made a couple of mistakes, which in gymnastics you're almost not allowed. So
Yeah.
she was looking at the podium going, she was getting further and further away from the podium, and she kind of broke down, and she's telling the story. She had a moment and called her mom and crying and all this stuff. And her mom, and her last routine was going to be on the beam, which the way I understood it was her weakest routine of all. And her mom said, "Hey, Shan, did you do the work?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Then trust the process. If you did the work, then trust the process." And I stood there. I'm like, my God, what a simple question to ask anyone, any of us, right? Like I actually caught myself asking the question to myself since then. I'm like, all right, did I do the work? Like, why am I pissed off here? And if the answer is no, I'm like, well, you don't get to be pissed off. Like, go do the work first and then see what happens. But so I think these things are critical right now, with especially what's going on in our industry, right?
I'm jotting that down right now because I think it's so interesting. I think it's really correlated to the issue we're facing right now is when you say, did you do the work? I think this is the disconnect is the the work is the input with an expected output. And I think the as you're saying this, it was kind of an aha moment for me is I think this is a disconnect is the amount of work it took to win yesterday in business is a different ratio of work to winning
Yeah.
that it takes today. So I think that's what the problem is did you do the work? And for a lot of people that aren't slowing down to think through that, they're saying, well, yeah, I'm doing the exact same thing I did before, and it's not yielding the result. And so it might be a different work, or it might be a different proportion of work that needs to be done. So I love that question. Did you do the work, but have you identified the work that actually needs to be done for the result you want? Which
You
goes
could
back to your
tweak
other
it to
question.
you could tweak it. Did you do the right work?
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. And I think it really goes back to you, like the first question you asked is, what result do you want to get? Like, what is
Yeah.
it you want to have happen? And and as I'm thinking through this, it's generally people are happy to define that. They've thought through that. I want to make X amount of money. I want to spend X amount of time at home. I want to go on this vacation. Like, I think that's the brilliant thing you have to start with is let's get clarity on what you want, and then let's work it backwards to what's the work that equals that.
I think there's very few people I've come across that lack clarity around what they want.
Mm.
I think most people lack clarity around the cost that is needed to achieve what they want. And very few people, as they want bigger things, very few people are willing to pay that cost. And I think there's a huge gap. I joke in my market center when we do the business clinic in October, I'm like, all right, put it down. Everybody's going to make $100,000 next year. We all know the math. We all know how it works. Now, who's going to actually go do it? Because you're right, the ratio and the required amount of work now is different. right? So
Yeah.
it's, I think people have clarity around the want, but they get uncomfortable with what's needed in
Yeah.
my experience.
And I don't think enough people slow down enough to like really articulate what they really want. And I actually think social media has caused part of this problem is, if in people's morning scroll of social media, they see a friend of theirs in Hawaii, they're like, well, I want that. That's for this moment, that's what I want. Their afternoon scroll of social media shows someone driving a new car, and all of a sudden, well, I like that car. I want that car. So they're shifting. If they're shifting priorities of what they want so fast because they haven't really flushed out, like, what do I really want? Like, what down to my core, what's important to me? It's hard to formulate a game plan and execute it long enough if the end game is constantly shifting of what they think they want.
Well, I think a lot of people underappreciate the journey. I think a lot of people skip the fulfillment that you can get out of the journey, and then oftentimes can get to the outcome, the desired outcome. But I think if you're if any individual is willing to embrace the journey, then your outcome is just a byproduct of it. So and I think you get to the end and you're like, oh, well, I did it, but the fulfillment occurred during the journey. So if you truly embrace the journey, I think is where you can get you can have some sort. I personally get more fulfillment out of the journey than I do out of the outcome. Because if I'm crushing the journey, the outcome just become expected.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up because this is, I mean, just being vulnerable again. I look back at my younger self and I'm just like, man, I had so much to learn, and I still do, and it'll be fun in a couple of years to look back and look at the idiotic things I'm doing today for lessons. But it was so much part of my vernacular, and I still catch myself in this vernacular sometimes where I'm like, well, if I could just get to here, then I'll have this, or if I could just do this, if I can just hire this person, if I can just launch this business, if I could just get the business to here, then I'll be happy. Then I'll do these things, instead of, to your point, of just being like, yeah, guess what? When I do those things, there's going to be another obstacle, another pain point in my world that's a new thing introduced to my world that I should be grateful that I'm to a level that I need to deal with that obstacle, right? So
Yeah.
I love that idea of like embracing the journey. Like, was there a specific thing that happened in your world that taught you that lesson, or how did you pick that up and understand that?
I've learned it a couple of times. I don't. The first time I was introduced to it, I didn't understood it until later. But my last year of playing junior hockey in Canada, we won a national championship, and by far to this day was it was probably the toughest year of my life. Like the journey was so hard and so long and so physically, emotionally, and mentally demanding. But then when we got to the end, it's like we did it. And I remember like we came back, we were on the bus and there was no party. We were all tired. Like we were all beat up and guys were hurting and bruised up and we're like 100+ games into it and all this stuff. And but to this day, I think what what I learned is that you can't experience the end without embracing the journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, right? And you hear this in sports all the time, like that, like winning is fun. And I always say, anyone who says it's fun has never truly won, because it is hard. And if you think if you think the journey itself is, I personally wouldn't characterize the journey as fun. The outcome of it is fun for sure, but the journey itself is not something I would characterize as fun. And then I look at taking a market center that's not profitable to $500,000 in profit. Like the outcome was awesome, but the journey was way better, way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I feel like if we let emotions drive it, which there is a place for emotion because it creates action, but you also can let emotions be to define good and bad. Oh, this is good, this is bad. And I think I've had to, in some element, get a little zen with some things to be like, well, it just is, right?
That's right.
It's outside of my control. So the situation it just exists outside of my control. What I do about it is within my control. And that has changed the journey for me too, is just not to like, and I think we're seeing that in our industry. The real estate industry is under this new attack and new evolution that so many people are crippled by, that they have zero power over. And there's part of it, you just have to say, well, it just is what it is right now. Am I going to be part of the solution? If I was going to be part of the solution, how do I approach that?
Yeah, I think it goes to like what you're describing, what I'm hearing, like being part of the solution and all. It's about how are you looking at situation to use the situation to prepare yourself about the things you can control instead of trying to change the things that you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of time people had a lot trying to find solutions or masterminding around things that they really have very, very little, if any, impact over, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at our industry, there's a lot of people out there that choose to adopt the thought process that commission may go down. I've been saying since day one to my agents here in St. Louis, why don't you find a way to give yourself a raise?
Yep.
Like there's nowhere in any of the documentation that it says it has to go down. So why do we have to accept and assume the general idea that it will? Like why can't you be the one that comes out like, no, I'm gonna find a way to communicate my worth, and I'm gonna take advantage of this the way it's stated. I'm gonna negotiate accordingly, and I'm gonna show my value, and therefore I'm gonna change my own economics. Like
Yep.
like who says you can't do that?
Yep. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I love that. One last topic I want to touch on with you real quick is one of the things that I've really come to the realization of is I'm proud of the teams I've built around me, and honored that people in my world have given me the opportunity to lead over the last several years. And I feel like for a lot of them, I was a good leader in that time. Not a perfect leader, but my effort and desire to be a good leader to them kept them in my world. And I'm very much of the belief right now that I owe it to all the people in my world to ask the question, am I the leader they need tomorrow? Because it's a different world. If I'm telling them they need to show up differently in a world tomorrow. So one of the things I'm really looking at is analyzing my own leadership and asking the question of where am I lacking in knowledge, skill, relationship, accountability, to ensure, because I want to be that person. I love leading and supporting my people. So as you're analyzing your own leadership, like where are you focused on growing and improving your leadership to be the leader your people need you to be this coming year?
It's a great question. I think this may sound crazy, but I feel like I'm a better leader in a crisis than I am in good times. So there's a part of me like secretly that I'm like, all right, this may kind of play into my wheelhouse right now if I can just create confidence, if I can empower people to trust the process, if I can get them to embrace the journey and just kind of follow where we're going and not worry about the noise and listening to whatever it is they're listening. I think we'll be that much better off on the other side. And I sincerely believe that. So I think as things get crazier, I typically get calmer. When things get really good, the way we've experienced in the past, then I get quieter because it's like everyone thinks they are an expert at that point, and everybody's doing good. And I'm like, I don't see it that way, but I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, so I just kind of get quiet about it.
Yeah.
So now that it's the opposite, I feel like I'm in a good place to help people out. And like I said, my goal is to create safety and security in what we're doing and how we're doing it by creating like logical steps for our journey that people believe in, and really steer the ship in a way that is fundamentally driven, not emotionally driven, not with hope or things like that. It's just like they're regardless of times. I've always been a big believer in fundamentals. So I think if we go back and master fundamentals and add obviously a few things here and there, I think there's still a lot of success to be achieved by a lot of us. So that's how we look at it right now.
No, I totally agree with that. And I love the analogy you used about steering the ship too, because you think about, a ship in the midst of a storm. The storm is going to be the same regardless. But if you have a captain standing at the wheel that's confident of like, okay, I know how to do this, the crew is going to show up differently with that captain, other than the captain that's looking around panicked in the exact same storm, right? They can't change the storm that they're in, but their confidence and being like, well, this is what we trained for. We know what to do. Like they look at the captain's confidence of being like, okay, we got this, just changes the demeanor of it significantly. I think that's such a good analogy. So as you know, a lot of our listeners are in the real estate space, but a lot of them are business owners and leaders right now. As we wrap up our conversation, any last advice you'd give them in regards to leadership or how to connect with their people that we can wrap up on today?
I think if it, regardless of the level that you're at or the business that you're in, I think if you choose to embrace a path of leadership, you need to understand that your business is people, not whatever it is you're doing, right? Like I said earlier, like you and I are real estate people, but I look at it, my business is people and real estate's my product. So as a leader, I think if you're listening to this, then I would encourage you to embrace the fact that you're in the people business. And whether you have a team of 1 or 20 or 200 or whatever, then I would encourage you find ways to master the people business, because now you're juggling people's lives, and it's harder it's harder to patch somebody's life than it is to deal with a product. So make sure you understand the opportunity and grateful the opportunity that you have to lead other people. And I think the way I look at it is I do it by focusing on being respectful of other people's lives and journey by making sure that I deliver what I commit to.
Awesome. Well, man, I sure appreciate your leadership, your example, your friendship. Excited about some of the stuff we have going on together right now, and continuing to watch you grow and thrive. Anybody that wants to lean into you and follow you and see what you're up to, what's the best way for them to either follow you or get a hold of you?
If I was a social media guy, I would have some sort of hashtag to give you, but I'm not there yet. So I'll just give you my email if someone needs to reach out. But it's my first initial D, my last name, Brosso. It's BROSSEAU @kw.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. My big takeaway, lots of little nuggets here, but if I was to share my last takeaway with you, Enchilada Nation, this would be it, is going back to that question we asked, did you do the work? And specifically, did you do the right work? So one of my daily routines and my close out the day meeting I have with myself every night, I've got a checklist I go through with myself to kind of give myself a grade of did I do the work? And I'm actually going to add that to it, of asking myself that question at the end of the day. Did you do the right work? And I kind of think of that in two sides. As a leader right now, I've got kind of two sides of the right work. Number one is, did I actually do the work on myself to grow and become something? Am I reading the right things? Am I studying the right things? Am I having the right inputs in my world? And then did I do the right work by actually showing up for and with my people the way they need me to right now? Not just calling them there's a problem, but did I connect with them emotionally and understand what they're going through? Those are kind of the two things that pop into my mind. I may refine that a little bit as I put some more thought into it, but in my mind, in my role, that's what I would identify as the right work. I'd encourage you guys that are listening to this, take a moment today and think about what is the right work, because I know you're all working hard, but what is the right work to ensure you're going to win in the future? You got this. Don't forget, Enchilada Nation, go live life on your terms.